Today I'll be exploring the Cambridge IGCSE Geography paper, in particular paper 4, and looking at all the different ways you can get full marks on any question that involves you having a student investigation that explores an environmental quality survey. So the purpose of this video is, unlike in, say, other videos I've done with map skills, the purpose of the video is for you that as you found a past paper to do and you realise that it's focusing on an environmental survey, you can watch this video or re-watch this video to help you recap the key points that you need to mention about when it comes to an environmental survey, and then you can have a go at then writing your answer. There are so many different types of human investigations that it's very difficult for me to go through one paper because they're all slightly different. So again, I've tried to pick out from a variety of past papers, which I've indicated the general points which you can use and apply to any past paper. So please first identify past papers that you might want, and then use this video to help you remember, recap, refresh your minds, or check what it is you've written, or before you start writing. Why, compared to my previous videos where I've been looking at rivers and coasts, why have I gone on to look at the method only? Well, human investigations tend to use similar methods. You could have anything from migration to tourism, from industry to foods, and you could be doing an investigation on that, and all of them will be using the similar methods. And so because of that, there are too many, as I mentioned, too many variations of a human investigation. So because there are too many variations about what you actually investigate, what unifies them is the method that you use. And each method has very specific points. An environmental survey is very different to a questionnaire. Whereas when you're doing a rivers investigation, you use similar equipment, but you do that in a very different way. So when it comes to these, you need to look at past papers and practice with this video. If you're unsure, rewind, go to the various chapters and have a go. So what is an environmental quality survey? An environmental quality survey uses observations to assess the quality of a place against a range of indicators. So the indicators and here's an example on the right hand side, those indicators you decide. So you decide what they are, and they tend to be, on one side they tend to be sort of more positive, and on the other they tend to be negative, and and you score them between the two extremes. And so we use that to indicate the concerns or views people have about a place. And so with that data, you can use it to maybe suggest improvements to an area. But the main thing to recognise with an environmental quality survey is that it is subjective. You have to decide the results, and your opinion might be very different to the opinion of another person. And that's something you need to factor in when it comes to writing a method and evaluating this method. So, to go through this video, I'll be going out a range of things that come with data collection. Now remember, please, the data collection questions on paper 4 are perhaps the most content-specific things that you need to remember for this exam. Everything else is either a skill, like drawing a graph, interpreting data, drawing conclusions, or the theory behind the investigation, whereas this is the actual more specific content to this paper. So we'll be exploring hypotheses, types of surveys, how to go about collecting data, making sure it's reliable, pilots and risks, sampling. So these are some examples of hypotheses that have been used. And what I should do is take a pause now and have a little read and think about what are the sort of general themes from these hypotheses. What I mean by that is if you had a generic hypothesis, what are they exploring? If you had to write your own one, how could you structure it? What connects these hypotheses? Are there some similarities in how they're written? Let's have a little pause and see what you think. So if we look at these 4, you can see that pretty much the hypotheses either compare the environmental quality of 2 different areas, of 2 different land uses, or show how they change as you move from an area or around an area. So that's really important. If you are asked to write a hypothesis, remember that. Are you comparing 2 locations, 2 types of land uses, or is it something changes as you move away from somewhere else? And just to recap, these are the types of environmental surveys that we use. The first one on the left-hand side is what we call a bipolar scale. So that either goes from a positive number to a negative number, or from negative to positive. Either way, it helps you to reinforce the 2 extremes. So in this case, you've got a beautiful landscape all the way down to an ugly landscape. And then you have what's called a sliding scale. So you're going from 0 to 3. Now remember, you could argue that where you have the clear scale, the clear descriptions. That makes it a bit easier for you to sort of decide where your number should be, but at the same time, it is also very subjective. Beautiful and ugly varies depending on who you are. Peaceful, noisy varies depending on who you are and what you're used to. Someone who lives in the countryside might consider noisy to be something that someone might consider to be very peaceful in an urban setting. So again, this is where the issue of something being subjective is. So let's look at a worked example. Explain how the students would organise and carry out their fieldwork survey using the form shown in figure 2.2. So this is the form shown in figure 2.2. So how would you go about using that? So the first thing you might want to consider is what type of survey is it? Is it a bipolar? Is it a sliding scale? And then once you've got that, then you can always remember that actually at the end of it, you need to record your results on this. So you already have 2 points that you can mention. So how to get full marks on this? Well, let's go back to the hypotheses and how is that going to influence what we write about. So Ratcliffe has a better quality environment than Mossbank. So my hypothesis asked me to compare 2 locations. So that's something I might have to consider with my methods. Remember, we've got a bipolar scale. So that's going from +3 to -3. And so that is 2 bits of information that we're going to include in our survey. So what would I write? Well, something like students need to get into different groups, decide, and go to different locations around Ratcliffe and Mossbank. So you need to get into groups, decide where you want to go, what sites you're going to use around Ratcliffe and Mossbank. I'm then going to make sure that all groups need to start to collect the data at the same time and end at the same time. So you're going to take about 5 minutes to make that decision. We then begin by first circling the location. Are you going to be in Ratcliffe or Mossbank on the top of the form? Remember what that form looked like. And as a group, agree on which score they would give each indicator and mark it on the form. So that is, got those marks there. And if we look at the mark scheme, we can see that, yep, get into groups, happy days. We decide on, we go to different locations around Ratcliffe and Mossbank. We make sure we collect the data at the same time. We first begin by circling the location, and as a group, we agree on which score they would give each indicator and mark it on the form. Fantastic. So that is a really important point. If you can't remember anything else, the final point, point 4, is perhaps just write it down on a piece of paper on your mark scheme, and you should get 1 mark. For most human methods, you actually have to record the data on a data collection sheet. So make sure you remember to do so. Now this is how you write the you respond to this point if the question asks you to explore how the quality of the urban environment improves as distance from this town centre increases. So the previous point I showed you when you're comparing 2 locations, this is when it talks about change over a distance. So again, it starts off going, the students need to get into different groups, select a series of transects that are the same distance from the town centre, for example, 1 kilometre. Using systematic sampling, divide each transect into a number of sites, for example, 10, with each the same distance apart. So maybe, for example, every 100 meters you record the data. All groups need to start to collect the data at the same time and end at the same time. As a group, agree on which score they would give each indicator and mark it on the form. So this would be something you would write if it's about how you how you would use the environmental quality as if your hypothesis is looking at as distance changes from the town CPD. So the key points to remember about when you are writing a data collection response using an environmental survey. Check the hypothesis and structure your response accordingly. You either divide groups into divide the groups to go to sites across 2 locations, or you divide the transects into 10 sites and send students to them. You identify the type of survey if provided, or state one, and you agree a score and record it on the table. So the last thing that you would write is the final point. You agree a score and record it on the table. If you can do those, you should get full marks. So other things that might be you look into is evaluating your method. So for here you've got suggested advantages of using the reference sheet during the environmental quality survey. So again, at the bottom I've given you some key things to remember. So it's a description of each indicator so you know clearly what you are focusing on. It helps you to standardize scores, so reduces subjectivity, and it helps you to compare locations. If you are recording the location on each site, you can compare them against key indicators. So if I write these points here, okay, this is what any of these 2 will give you the full marks. It's just 2 reasons why the decisions made by the 2 students were different. Okay, so you've got same sites, different scores. Remember, Subjective, interpreting the descriptors. Okay, different people have different ways of judging something, if something's ugly or not. Time of day, doesn't state what time of day this data was collected. Was a pilot study done? So there's something that you need to consider. And are you looking at the same area at the site? You might have gone to site 2, but you might have made a mistake. Who knows? So again, decisions are subjective. So with anything with environmental quality survey, it is subjective. If that's not already stated, a good weakness to include is that it is subjective and that the survey might be done at different times. So that is a key thing to remember. Those two things are probably the easiest ones to remember. Oh, you might be unsure of the descriptors. Again, what does beautiful mean? What does varied types of scenery mean? If you're unsure, remember, that could also be a weakness. Hence, we do a pilot study. So, suggest 2 ways the groups of students could have organised themselves to make sure that their results were reliable. Again, I've included the 4 things at the bottom. So, I'm going to leave this on the screen for you. These are something that would be really helpful. So what they're doing is that how do you reduce subjectivity? How do you ensure the same time of day? Why about a pilot study? Okay, so here, work together, decide as a group. Okay, one person in the group scores the same feature in each area, so they are always focused. So if you're in a group of 3, you divide who focuses on what, etc., etc. So pause, include these into how you can go about making your data more reliable. And again, why do we do a pilot study? Remember, a pilot study is done before the main investigation. These are taken from this is not necessarily related to environmental survey, but it's actually something that can apply to any fieldwork. And so why we do it? We do it a pilot study to make sure a full-scale study take place. Are the sites safe and accessible? Do we require any additional costs and resources? But most importantly, in this case, it's familiarise yourself with the methods when it comes to environmental survey. It's familiarising yourself, making sure everyone in the group understands what each descriptors mean and what to focus on. So here we go. These are some key points that you can mention. Again, these are generic, relatively generic. You can apply most of these to any form of investigation. You also be asked questions on the risk assessment. So again, these are some of the main potential risks that you could dip into: temperature, weather changes, time of day, traffic, getting lost, how accessible are these areas. And what these questions ask you to do is pretty much something like this. Teacher gives some advice. What advice would they give? How to stay safe or reduce risks. So for example, if you're doing an environmental survey, you're probably looking at traffic. So watch out for traffic, keep away from the road, only stay on the pavements. To ensure you don't get lost, you might stay in a group, take a mobile phone, wear appropriate clothing. If it's going to be cold, you wear warm clothing, you might wear a high visibility jacket, remind them not to talk to strangers. So again, I'll leave this on the screen. These are some of the key risks that are involved, but also these statements are really useful because it tells you how to reduce those risks. So please pause and make some notes. Now, we've moved on from data collection methods to looking at data presentations of these data that you collect. Now, remember, there are a whole range of techniques. My advice to you is to copy the style that the exam papers used. Always use a pencil. And again, practice, practice, practice. The methods that I've shown here could apply to any investigation. So again, it's really useful practice, and I will be making other videos that show you how to go about either completing graphs of various techniques or how you go about constructing graphs. So please watch out, stay tuned for those. So this is an example of type of questions that involve you doing some data presentation. So here on the right hand side, you've got figure 2.7, shows the results of the environmental quality survey at the 3 sites. Using the information in figure 2.6 below, plot the results for general features at site 2 on figure 2.7. So I need to plot those ticks onto the graph. So I'm drawing a bar graph, and essentially if it's -2, I would draw a bar line up to -2 starting from 0. So for roads and pavements, I'm not going to draw anything because that's 0. For signs, I'm going to draw my line up to -2. So I'm always checking the axes at the top to make sure where +2 is and where -2 is. For lakes and streams, I'm drawing it up to -1. And for lots of insects and wildlife, I'm drawing across to the right for -1 as well. And that's how I would do the first one. Sometimes the questions might ask you to do a little bit of interpretation of the data. So here, for the first question, I need to look at sites 1 and 2 and work out which description of the buildings had the same scores. So in this case, it'd be vandalism and graffiti. Double check, please, if you're unsure. And then add up the scores. You need to calculate the total score difference for open space between sites 1 and 3. So to do that, I need to add up work out the total score, because that's what the question tells me. So I need to add up all of the values that have been scored, rated. I did it for sites 1 and site 3. So we've got 5 and minus 6, and I work out the difference between the two, and that gives me the answer of 11. So when looking at the mark scheme, these are all correct. So again, check clearly, take a little bit of time, double check everything if you're unsure. And when it's the total score or the average score, two different things. Here it's the total score, so add up all the values. If it was the average, I work out the average of the two. Remember, naught does count as a value. This is a question that looks at doing a little bit of drawing a graph and some sort of interpretation of the data. So for the first question, which site has the lowest total environmental quality score? So for that, I need to look at the right-hand column because the description of the title matches the question. And the lowest score, we're going into negative figures now, is -6. So I'm going to put site 14. For the second question, which one of the following has the highest total score across all 20 sites? So for this, I'm looking at the bottom part because that is looking at the total scores across all sites. Again, the descriptor matches the question. And so for that, I am looking at the highest total, and that's going to be noise. So I'll circle noise. And for here, I need to plot the total quality score for sites 15 and 16 on figures 2.3. So we got figures 15, the total score is -3 and +7. So I would get my ruler out, I would measure the distance between the various sites of what is the difference between 4 and 5 and draw my bar line accordingly, copying what they've done. If it's positive, I need to go up. If it's negative, I need to go down. So to refresh, how would I do that? Well, I'll take out my ruler and I know that every 3 points scores are 1 centimetre. So here for the first one, for sites 15, site 15 is -3, so I just need to draw down 1 centimetre, making sure I put all the various little points in. And for site 16, the score was +7, so I need to go up 2 and a bit centimetres to get to +7. Okay, copying exactly the key of how they've gone about drawing it, looking at the design of the other features. This one, I'm having to draw a simple scatter graph. So figures 2.4 shows the relationship between the total environmental quality score and distance of the phobic sites away from the village. Plot the following information. So you can see how I've done this. So for site 6, I'm going across to 450. So I'm double checking the y-axes and the x-axis, looking at what their scale is and what does one little square equal, and plotting my points accordingly. Please, some of these questions can be hidden, so do not miss them. So making sure, because these are very straightforward marks for you to get. So you can see how I've drawn site 16. Again, matched up from 450, going all the way up to +5, and for site 17 as well. Another one is complete figure 2 by marking on the location of 2 sites, O5 and R3. So again, I have to work out where O5 is. It's distance from the town centre. It's 4.5 kilometres in a southwest direction from the town centre, and for the residential, east-northeast. So for this, I might need to again work out the scale first. So I've got my ruler, I put it up against there. So that's really straightforward. 1 centimetre equals 1 kilometre. I might draw my compass just to refresh the directions of the directions I have to go in. So southwest and east-northeast. Now remember, when you are plotting on the points, the start point in this case is the town centre, and the direction I'm going in a southwest direction from the town centre. Hence, my ruler has been positioned like this. I'm going 4.5 kilometres, so I need to plot my point at 4.5 centimetres, and I'll copy exactly what they did. So in this case, I'm going to put an X and I'm going to write O5. I'm doing this in red so it stands out. And again, east by northeast, I've got my compass, I've got my bearings, I've got my ruler angled in that direction. So remember, I'm going from the town centre in an east by northeast direction. And I'm going 3.8 kilometres or 3.8 centimetres. And I'm going to draw my points and label it accordingly. Here, I need to plot sort of a variety of methods here, but I'm going to copy it exactly. So I need to plot first the residential site of R1 and the average mean value for industry. So I'm going to look at these various scores. So the residential site for R1 is 8. So I'm going to plot that on here. And then the second thing is the average mean value for industry. And it's a bar line, so I'm going to plot that in as well. So again, I've looked at examples, I've copied exactly what they've done in the style, I've taken my time, I've highlighted the areas of the resources I need and done my points accordingly. This one is slightly tricky, essentially doing an advanced line graph. And so here I'm going to focus and highlight the scores I need to plot. So I'm going to complete it for the values of traffic, vandalism, graffiti, litter, and that's what I need to do. And so I'm going to take it nice and straightforward by first identifying the star I need to use. So it's a circle with a thick bold, with a thick line, not dotted, connecting to another circle. I'm going to draw this with a pencil, taking my time. So I'm going to go, right, first of all, I've got to go to +2, then +3, then down, back down to +1. I've just made these lines a little bit thicker and in red, so it's easier for you to see, but please do this in a pencil. So again, a common question that you are asked in all of paper 4 questions, no matter what the topic is or the theme of the geography that you have to investigate, but it's something that requires just lots of practice to get your head around and a certain structure in how you respond. Is when you get a hypothesis and you have to draw conclusions from a hypothesis that's been given to you from the evidence that the student has collected within this investigation. So I've got 3 examples here. I just want to go through about how you would respond. First of all, you need to look at the evidence that they've been given. Has the hypothesis been proven or not? Is it true, false, partially true? Once you've looked at the hypothesis, you need to sort of state from that, has the data reflect an increase, or is one area higher or better than the other? Is there variety? And use and provide evidence that proves or disproves that hypothesis. So if I look at the mark schemes here and I can draw from that, you can see that every mark scheme gives you 1 mark to state if it's true or false. And then you can see here that all of them require you to quote data that best supports that statement if you think the hypothesis is true or not. And again, for this, you need to go away, practice, have a go. I can't really go through so many different examples here, but the benefit is that with so many past papers out there, that through practice, you can just get into your habit of making sure you first state if it's true or false, and then you draw out data that best supports that your view. Now, sometimes after you do a hypothesis, you might need to provide sort of reasons why there is a variation or there's not a variation. So here, for example, and this is when you need to draw on from your paper 1 geography. So here's a question: suggest reasons why there is a variation in the quality of the environment between industrial sites and urban area. So again, look at the data that's been provided for you, because that might actually give you some clues. And remember, you need to draw back on what do we mean by an economic activity. Okay, so this what we mean is concerned with the processing of raw materials and manufacture of goods in factories. So simply, some industries might be noisier than others. Okay, so if one of the environmental surveys looks at noise, well, some might be very noisy compared to others, and some might have more traffic than others, depending on what they are manufacturing or what the industry is involved with. So again, it's a little bit of common sense, a little bit of looking at the data, and remember, you are comparing different locations, so different locations could be different industries, and so they might all have different quality of environments around them. And again, here there's some nice little mark schemes just to help you think about the idea that, if you've got extremes of different sites, different locations, different industries, referring to different qualities of environment. So again, using this to suggest how could local governments improve the environment of low-scoring areas. Well, again, if they've scored really low in some areas, like those, or very negatively in some areas, that for example it's really noisy, you might want to put traffic limitations in. If there's loads of litters, you might simply want to put bins in. So it's basically about how to transform low scores to high scores and what solutions you could put in. So we could repair roads and pavements, we could plant more trees. And again, these are the types of things based on your environmental quality of what you can do to improve the quality, or simple things that you can do to improve the quality of an area based on the data that's being collected. And again, suggest reasons for the positive scores given by the students for this site on figures 2.8. So why are buildings in good conditions? Why is there lots of parks? Why are parks well maintained? So you need to think of all the different reasons. So if there are no buildings, no trees had to be cleared. There are lots of bins, therefore this should hopefully encourage people to not drop litter. There must be little traffic in the area, and lakes have not been polluted. So again, just drawing out the reasons from the score. So to recap, first of all, when you get these questions, identify the type of environmental quality survey that's been used. Remember, it is subjective, so scores need to be agreed and recorded down. And practice. Whenever you get these questions, practice. Any question you don't use, go back over this video and have a little look using the chapters to help you. These are the websites I've used to help me put this, this paper together, as well as the past papers that I've identified as we've gone through. Thank you for watching. If you found it useful, please like. And if you think it'd be useful for your fellow peers, please share.